Hey guys, hope you're well. This is going to be my review of the first episode of the new Channel 4 drama series, It's a Sin. It's by Russell T Davies, Doctor Who, Sherlock, various other things, and it's at least partly based on his experiences growing up in the 1980s in London, his experience as a homosexual at the time, and obviously some of the experiences in general, but also some of the discrimination of the era against homosexuality, and I guess, yeah, some of the challenges of homosexuals coming out, but also a big sort of plot in this drama is going to be about AIDS and obviously the development of AIDS, and it of course first became a thing, came out in the 1980s. And so at the start of the drama and throughout the drama, it looks like we're going to follow these three very different characters, I guess, but they're all homosexual, they're all young people, but they're all at the start at least have some sort of issue with telling their families about their sexuality, about being confident in public with it and kind of finding their feet. And they all come to London for various reasons. So you have the Richie character, who I think is the most sort of focused on in this first episode. He's played by Ollie Alexandra, and he is leaving home to go to university in London. And he, at the start of the drama, hasn't told his kind of more traditional family about his homosexuality. They have no idea, and it's about him kind of finding his feet at uni and how he kind of gets slowly more confident, where by the end of the episode he feels right at home, and he has a whole sort of scene and group that he hangs around with. He has a close friend who he meets early on, called, I think it was Jill, and she befriends him, and they sort of strike up a bond, and she introduces him to other people, to men who, potentially he could go with. And he really becomes more confident over the course of the episode, but at the same time, he wrestles with whether to tell his family. And there's quite an interesting scene in the middle, actually, where he appears as though he's on the verge of telling them, because he comes home for Christmas with Jill, brings her along, and I think their natural reaction is that she's probably his girlfriend. Certainly, they don't expect, because they have no idea that he's gay. But we're certainly meant to believe, I think, that he intends to tell them then. But he actually ends up telling them that he's switching courses. He's actually switching from law to drama, and that's a very interesting scene, actually, and their reaction to it, because the father in particular is furious at him changing career paths, if you like, because it's sort of getting the sense that at this time law was and obviously it's still seen this way today, but then it's a serious career path. You're kind of set in a way for life, money wise, if you end up in law, if you get a career in law, and obviously arty type, jobs, because he wants to be an actor. He reveals to them, uh, they're not really the way to go, because unless you're very good at it or you get a big break, then you're probably going to struggle for money. So, and I think some of those attitudes probably still exist today, but especially back then, I think there's particularly sneering at arty type roles and people with ambitions to be in that sort of world. And we also have Roscoe, who certainly ends up in the group. I think is going to become like a love interest, maybe for Richie, but he's from like a traditional like African type family. So at the start of the episode, when we first see him, his family finds out, and they're basically going crazy at him. It's very heavily religious family that they're like damning him to hell. So with the help of his sister and a bit of money she gives him, he escapes to London, and he becomes part of the scene as well. And basically, the impression is that then he would actually be killed if he went back to his home country, and it was revealed that he was gay. It's such an extreme, tradition when it comes to homosexuality being a no-no, that then that would be the consequence. So it's kind of shocking the way that sort of worked into it. And then the other character we meet, the main character, is Colin, who's from a small Welsh town, and he actually goes to London to work, and he basically early on is like objectified by his boss, who's we also find out is homosexual, but kind of does objectify him and makes Colin very very nervous. He's a really timid character we see, but he's sort of taken under his wing by this character Neil, played by Neil Patrick Harris. There are a couple of star names in this. Keely Halls is in it as well. She plays Richie's mother. So, and Neil Patrick Harris as well. Really good casting. He plays this character Henry, who works at the same. It's some sort of an investment firm or part or insurance or something along that lines. But yeah, he's obviously on to what's going on with the boss, kind of trying to seduce Colin. It's almost quite a comical scene because he has him back after work its first day, and he's basically stripped him down and is like cleaning him, or he's stripped down the boss pretty much, and he's cleaning him, and it's that old sort of thing about you must be absolutely spick and span, but really he's just using it as an excuse to kind of get intimate sort of thing. But the Henry character comes back, and he's kind of like he finds a way to like sort of get rid of the boss, and then he takes Colin for a drink and they start talking, and he reveals that he's basically homosexual, and he sort of like stands up for Colin. He's a very kind of outspoken, confident guy, but also he comes off as very sort of solid and likable and dependable, and seems to have, seems to take a shine into Colin, even though he says, I've got a boyfriend already and stuff, but seems to be looking out for him. He can see that he's new to all this and going into the big city. So that's the basic setup. And I think you can tell from some of the things I'm saying. I thought it was really good. I thought it was a really strong first episode. Each character, I think, felt realistic and nicely sort of written. They felt like real people, but very diverse. I think they're all different people, obviously tied together by their experiences and their sort of anxieties. Good casting, as I said, very sort of natural, and I think also it gets the balance right between light and dark. I think it can switch around at the sort of right times, and those sort of transitions are well timed and everything. I think it does have a light touch, which I think sometimes you need with these sorts of dramas, but I don't think they sort of portray the characters or betray the characters. I think they feel true to the characters, and you kind of go on this ride with them. And I mean, with Richie, for example, his like experiences and his energy and nervousness, and obviously at the start of the drama, he hasn't really had sex before, certainly not with a man, and we see this sort of frank first sexual experience, which doesn't go too well, and definitely it's played quite close to the bone. A particular scene where is the guy he's having sex with, tells him you need to clean your bum, basically. Um, but those more funny, lighter moments, I think, definitely work well. And I think that does feel like the sort of like encounter that could sort of happen. Um, so you definitely go along on this journey. But then, as I said, when it does need to turn dark, when it focuses on the AIDS or have a more serious moment, I think it definitely hits home because on the Colin side of the plot is when the sort of the sort of theme and the story around AIDS starts up, because it's first rumoured that his boss has it and he's kind of replaced at work. And it's sort of funny the way you can almost compare this to what's going on now, or what's happened the last year or so with the development of this virus, because the current one, because you can think of it almost, yeah, the sort of growth of it and the stories around it does feel a bit like what would have happened with AIDS, where these stories just start showing up in the media and in the press, and then it's suddenly this unknown sort of fear, I guess, this own unknown threat which suddenly springs up on people. And there's this change in the Henry character, and he starts avoiding Colin, because Colin has gotten quite close to him and also his partner. And he soon finds out the reason Henry's been avoiding him is because he's I mean, it's described at the time as cancer, but then it's kind of like infectious and can spread on. So we soon realise then he's what he's got is AIDS. And Colin visits Henry in the hospital, and just the chilling nature of that scene where he goes in and they have to like dress him up in like the gloves and the protective like overalls and stuff, the hospital gear, and he goes into the room. There's just something unnerving and chilling about that scene. And yeah, it is hard to watch. I think they really nail those moments as well, and I think they get across the stigma and just how, I don't know, backwards, people's reaction to this sort of thing can be, and how difficult it must have been, to be homosexual and be, you know, someone who has this disease at the time, because there was little or no understanding, and because the era, particularly maybe, well, I guess all over the place, but in some ways, London always been a more liberal place than some. But anyway, certainly it's not as accepting as things are now. So I think it really gets that across, and some of the stigma, as I said, because like this scene in the hospital where Colin, as I said, has to get sort of protective gloves and the gown and stuff, and he goes in on his own, and we we see that the meal for Henry each day just gets put at his door, and Colin at one point has to go and get it for him. And it's one of those scenes where it just, Henry's basically being treated like a second class citizen sort of thing. Neil Patrick Harris is really great in this first episode. It's a one shot for him because he his character does die at the end, and there's something very cold about the way they kind of take his body away as well. But he's really good in it. I think he's very convincing as playing British, and he has that charisma and confidence that we're used to seeing him. But then he does do the more kind of human moments very well as well. I think when he's in the hospital bed and he's talking to Colin, he's very sort of stilted and very kind of just out of it really, and very sort of numb and stuff, and he plays that side beautifully as well. So I think it's a really good bit of casting. And what's basically going to happen is that Colin, who seems at this stage the most alone because he's just lost the guy who like befriended him the most since coming to London, so he's going to end up meeting the other group of characters, Richie, Roscoe, and the rest of them, Jill, at the pub, and he's going to be called along or invited along to this house party with them. And we see the lack of confidence, how nervous he is compared with the rest of them. Because, as I said, Richie sort of gets more confident over the episode, and by the end of it, he's like sleeping around and has regular sort of flings and has a whole scene with them. And I thought that was quite interesting, the way he gets more confident. And it's with Colin, he's still very much at the end of the episode, he's kind of where Richie was at the start more. And obviously it's a very provocative subject, because obviously we see Richie sleeping around with all these guys, and it's, you know, it's accepted, and it's what it should be. I guess it's just at this point you don't really know, you have no idea, and certainly it gets across the excitement really of being young, free, and kind of single, because he doesn't have a regular partner. He does sort of sleep around, and that's just treated as normal and the way it should be. But one thing I really like, because the way the episode ends, Colin actually, you know, takes up the room. Like, there's a spare room at this house where the party is, and because he now needs a place after what happened. So they all sort of go off the next morning. They go for breakfast, or sorry, that they go off to their respective things. Like, I think Richie, because he's focusing on acting, he has like a meeting, I think, with an agent or something like that. And the three characters all have respective meetings. There's Colin has like a meeting with his boss, and Roscoe has a meeting. I wasn't quite sure like what his meeting was, but he has this more sort of unusual type meeting with this character in a pub. But they all go off, and I think the ending was really well done. The way it brought the characters together, and the way it sort of highlighted this is them moving forward, what's going to happen. It's sort of them leaving the house. You got a real energy from them walking around this house, getting up in the morning, interacting, and even Colin starting to feel more like part of a family and getting confident, and them leaving. There was just a vibrancy and acceptance and a sort of a freedom. But I think then they're sort of thrown out into the harsh world sort of thing, and where things aren't going to be as easy, things aren't going to be as accepting. So I thought that was a really good contrast between them leaving in a sort of an upbeat sort of mood, and then the daunting challenges in the outside world. And you do get like this thing with them, and them all being asked what your plans are for the next 10 years. Where do you see yourself? That kind of stereotypical question, and they all answer in a different sort of way. I mean, obviously, Colin's thinking about he kind of gives like the safe answer about moving up the company and stuff. And Roscoe has this very sort of feisty answer, which is kind of tongue in cheek, but he says, in 5 or 6 years, I can see myself being filthy rich, sort of owning the world in a way, or ruling the world, or he said there's that sort of phrase. And yeah, it's just capturing them. And what it does is it sort of cuts to obviously Henry being dead now and being taken away. So the sort of contrast there, but also there's a scene where one of them, I think it's either Roscoe or one of like the other friends, sort of reads them like the paper article, and that's when they first read about this sort of new illness, like. And there are a couple like sort of little bits like this goth girl at the party. Actress is very familiar. I wasn't quite sure it was, but she kind of has this kind of conspiracy theory that it's the government giving like gay people this sort of virus thing or this illness, gay cancer, I think she calls it. But yeah, it was a really strong episode. I think they really captured the music very well, the sort of era. I think it definitely gets across not just the discrimination against, gay culture, but also the discrimination against different races. And yeah, I mean, it's almost just a small thing, but like Colin, I think at one point when he first gets to London and he moves in to like where he's going to be staying, I think he's casually mocked by the landlady for being Welsh. And I think that's something it shows, the fact that at this point, maybe, even though you think of the 80s as not being that long ago, I think it was still uncommon at that point for someone from Wales, maybe a small town in Wales, to move to London. And that's the energy we get at the start of the episode. It really sells just what an adventure this is and how they are a fish out of water. And I think that works as a really good metaphor because they already feel sort of alien because of their sexuality sort of thing, but they also feel alien because they're in a new city and they're alone. They don't really know anyone. And definitely you get some striking sort of racial moments, like when Richie takes Jill home for the holidays with him, and his dad is surprised that his son knows a black girl basically, or a coloured girl, and is kind of shocked, and he sort of covers it up and makes this effort to say no, no sort of discrimination from me. But yeah, it's definitely an awkward moment, and there's the sense that they're not accustomed to this. So it kind of captures the kind of just how different this sort of is, and how people weren't accustomed to it back there, and that there definitely is a stigma that sadly still exists today, but even more so back then. But it was well done. I thought it was a very good first episode, and I look forward to seeing the rest of it. I recommend you guys checking it out. Now, if you can't wait till next week, all 5 episodes of It's a Sin is up on the Channel 4 streaming service. I think it's it's All 4, sorry. More 4's the channel, but yeah, it's all up on All 4 if you want to just like binge it and check out the whole thing. But if, like me, you're a bit more traditional, you can do it once a week. It's on every Friday on Channel 4. So I enjoyed this first episode, so I will be reviewing more of It's a Sin. Check it out. Thanks for listening. like and subscribe to the channel if you are new, you want to see more of this stuff coming. You can also share the video on YouTube, share it out to your friends on social media. That would really help get some new views and more interest in the channel. And also you can ding the bell on YouTube, which will let you know when I go live on the stream, but also when a new video comes up. So yeah, I'll be back with the next episode of It's a Sin next week. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.